we all love free speech, right? I mean,
Yeah.
something we kind of take for granted. But what about when that freedom clashes with the spread of fake news, like all this stuff flying around online these days?
Yeah, no, it's a really tricky balance, isn't it?
It is,
Yeah.
especially in the digital age, right? So today we're diving deep into all of that, right?
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at freedom of expression in Mongolia specifically,
Okay,
based on some recent research.
cool.
The research is an article called Right to Freedom of Expression in Mongolia, Liberal Media Theory and Political Reporting. It's published in the Proceeding of Multidisciplinary Research Journal.
Catchy title.
Yeah.
Like it.
So basically we're looking at how these two really important things, being able to speak your mind and also needing to protect people from harmful lies, well, they kind of clash, especially when it comes to political reporting.
Yeah, and I think this article is going to highlight how those two ideas are constantly butting heads, especially in the world of political journalism.
Exactly. And it focuses on Mongolia specifically, which is really interesting.
It is.
Because they've had some unique challenges there, especially since they changed their criminal code back in 2020.
Right.
But before we get into like the nitty-gritty of Mongolia,
Okay.
can you give us kind of a broader perspective? Like, how is this tension playing out on like a global scale?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think, the rise of social media has been a huge factor in all of this, right? You've got these amazing platforms where people can say what they think and access tons of information. But the downside is it's also become this breeding ground for, like you said, fake news, disinformation.
Information, yeah.
Which can have some pretty serious consequences, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, we've seen elections being influenced, public health being jeopardized because of all these false narratives floating around.
Oh, for sure.
So every democracy is struggling with this right now. How do we protect free speech while also trying to stop the spread of harmful information?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right?
It is, yeah.
And it seems like Mongolia has decided to really tackle this head on.
Yep.
They've actually made it a crime to spread false information,
That's right.
which seems like a pretty bold move, right?
It is.
So what does that actually mean for people in Mongolia? Like, what are the specifics?
So the 2020 changes to their criminal code, they basically target anyone who's spreading false information with the intent to cause harm.
Okay.
So it's not just about getting a fact wrong.
Yeah.
It's about knowingly putting out lies that could, for example, disrupt public order
Gotcha.
or damage someone's reputation.
Oh, okay.
And the penalties can be pretty serious, too. We're talking fines,
Uh-huh.
even imprisonment in some cases.
Wow,
It's a big deal.
it's a big deal, especially for journalists, right?
Yeah,
Who are just trying to do their jobs and report on what's going on politically.
absolutely.
So you mentioned this article is really focused on political reporting in Mongolia. So what are some of the unique pressures and risks that those journalists are facing, particularly with this new law? Like, how does that play into it?
Well, you got to remember that their job is to hold the powerful accountable, right?
Right.
They're often dealing with really sensitive information.
Yeah.
And in a country that's still developing its democracy, that can be pretty risky.
Oh, yeah.
And then this new law comes along and it just adds this whole other layer of complexity.
Sure.
Because even if they're reporting truthfully, there's this fear now of being accused of spreading fake news.
Right.
And that fear can lead to what we call a chilling effect.
A chilling effect.
Yeah, basically it means journalists might start censoring themselves.
Oh, I see.
They might avoid certain topics
Yeah.
or hold back on important criticisms just because they're scared of getting in trouble with the law.
Right. So it's like, even with the best of intentions, this law could actually end up hurting press freedom.
Exactly.
The article also brings up this other really tricky issue. The whole clash between, being able to speak freely versus protecting people's reputations.
Yeah, that's a classic one.
Where do we even draw the line between okay, this is fair criticism and this is just harmful?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah.
It's something that every society struggles with, trying to find that right balance,
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have open discussion, which is vital for a healthy democracy, right?
Yeah.
People need to be able to voice their opinions, even if they're critical of someone or something.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't be afraid of getting punished for it.
Right.
But then on the other hand,
Yeah.
we have to protect individuals from harmful speech, the kind that could lead to violence or spread hatred or just unfairly ruin someone's reputation.
Totally.
So we've got these legal frameworks around things like defamation and hate speech, which are supposed to address this,
Uh-huh.
but it's a constant work in progress.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a really tough one to get right.
It seems like Mongolia is wrestling with all these same complexities, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like they have these guarantees of free speech written right into their constitution.
Yeah.
And they've signed all these international agreements that are supposed to protect those rights. But the article says that over the past decade, press freedom in Mongolia has actually been shrinking.
That's right.
So what's going on there? Like, how does that even happen?
It does seem kind of contradictory, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got these strong legal protections in place, but the reality on the ground tells a different story.
Yeah.
And this is where the research gets really interesting, I think. It delves into these specific factors that are contributing to this decline in press freedom.
Okay, like what?
Well, things like political influence over the media, for instance, or journalists having difficulty accessing information.
Right.
And then there are even cases of journalists being intimidated or harassed.
Wow.
Which is obviously a huge problem.
Yeah, that's scary.
Sadly, though, these challenges aren't limited to Mongolia.
Really?
We're seeing similar trends in other countries, even those with well-established democracies.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to recap here. We've got this whole web of issues going on, right?
Yeah. Yep.
We want to stop disinformation, but we also want to protect free speech.
Right.
We've got these political journalists who are facing all these unique challenges and risks. And then we see that press freedom is actually shrinking in Mongolia, even though they have these laws that are supposed to protect it.
It's a complicated situation, yeah.
It's complicated, yeah.
Yeah.
So for someone like you who's really been following all of this, what's the takeaway here? Like, what should we be thinking about as we move forward?
I think it really comes down to responsibility, you know?
Oh.
In a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, it's more crucial than ever to think critically about what we're reading, what we're watching, what we're sharing. Governments have a responsibility to make sure that any laws they create to fight disinformation don't end up silencing legitimate dissent.
Right. Yeah.
Journalists need to report truthfully and ethically, holding those in power accountable.
Yeah.
And all of us as individuals, we have a responsibility too.
What do you mean?
We need to be aware of the potential for bias and manipulation in the information we're consuming.
Oh, for sure.
And we need to be careful about what we choose to share.
Yeah. I mean, we can all do our part, right?
Absolutely.
It's like a collective effort to protect both truth and the freedom to speak our minds.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, this has been really insightful. Thank you so much for breaking all of this down for us.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
And for everyone listening, make sure you check out the show notes for a link to the full research article we talked about.
Yeah, definitely check it out.
It's well worth the read.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
See you then.